Hey everybody, this is The Vibe Broken Arrow. This is City Manager Michael Spurgeon. I am Aaron McCulloch, Director of Communications for the City of Broken Arrow, and we are talking 2026 General Obligation Bond Planning. So this is an exciting time. And I say it's an exciting time, but it's actually been an exciting year because we started this more than a year ago. And we came up with this idea to do these monthly updates with you so we can inform the public on just, kind of give them an update on the progress of these bonds. You've started doing that in city council meetings, every city council meeting since February. You've been giving the city council a little bit of an update. We're going to get to that. But first, we're still in the 2018 General Obligation Bond process. So how's that going? Give us an update on that status, and let's just talk about that for a little bit before we actually get into 2026.
Well, Aaron, it's good to be with you on the Vibe. You do such an amazing job of asking great questions and then following up and really just making sure that whoever you're interviewing provides the information that our citizens need to be able to make informed decisions about what's going on at City Hall. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm going to take a note and remember that when it comes to performance evaluation time here in a few months.
Yes. 2018, it seems like it was forever ago. However, really, it was just 7 years ago. The planning for the 2018 bond package, which Broken Arrow's voters voted on at the end of August of 2018, actually started shortly after I got here. I got here in September of 2015, and I learned probably towards the summer, early fall of 2016, is that we had an opportunity to go to the voters with our next bond package. And so we immediately began the process of determining what projects we wanted to ultimately submit to the council for them to approve and to submit to voters. And it was a very interesting process because as a new city manager, you're trying to learn the organizations, get yourself oriented to the organization and to the community, and then within less than a year, you find out that we're getting ready to do a major bond package. And Finance advised me at that time that it was looking like we were going to be able to do at least $200 million and a no tax rate increase type project, and it turned out to be $210 million, another $10 million than what we had thought, which was a real blessing. And it was a great process. I mean, actually, we had like $311 million worth of projects that we presented to the council in January of 2008, and the council had to go through the painstaking process of limiting that to $210 million. And they did that through a series of public forums, which we're going to do again later this year. But I'm so proud of what's been accomplished since the first of voters. There were 6 propositions, and every proposition passed with a great deal of comfort. Mm-hmm. I know that there were several, such as streets, as the drainage project, the stormwater, public safety, all got, and I believe in the low 70s. Mm-hmm. And then the other 2 projects got in the 64 and 67 respectively. I think that was parks and city facilities, and we're in the 60s. And so we were very proud that Broken Arrow voters actually came to the polls. I felt like they were very informed about what was in the package, and they approved it, and we've been blessed. And so here we are today, just, like I said, 7 years later, and I'm proud to say, which you already know, but what I want to share with the public is that there were 55 named projects. And in a bond proposition, each proposition has named projects and unnamed projects, and by state law, you have to complete the named projects. That is mandatory, either with the bond money or additional city money, and so you have to complete those projects. And according to the information that I've received, of the 55, in just 7 years, I believe we have completed 48 or 49 of the named projects, or they are under construction, and that is absolutely amazing. And great shout outs to all the department directors for their efforts to actually, when we ask the voters for funding, mm-hmm. basically make sure those projects completed.
So you mentioned that named and unnamed. So just real quickly, can we define what named? And so you did named. So what does the unnamed mean, as far as the voters and what they should know about that? Because we had 88 total projects, 55 were named, 33 unnamed. What does that mean, really?
Well, we had 6 propositions in 2018, and I would anticipate that we will have at least 6 propositions in 2026. We could have 7 or 8. That's still yet to be determined. But the first 6 are pretty easy to define. First, there's transportation, which will be what I like to say your asphalt and your concrete.
Yep.
Okay, number one. Secondly, will be public safety, which is your traditional police and fire and emergency management type capital improvement projects or initiatives. Third will be your what they call quality of life or parks and recreation. Your fourth will be city facilities. And then 5 will be your traditional stormwater. And then we added the 6th one back in 2018, and that was a drainage proposition. And that proposition was a proposition to where there's drainage issues on both public and private property. Well, the city can't spend public dollars on private property without having permission. And in order to get permission and use those dollars, you have to go through a bond proposition, which required 60% versus the traditional 50.1 for the other 5. And so we had 6 propositions sitting out there, and each proposition had projects were named and projects that were unnamed. Law says that you have to name 70% of your projects in each of the propositions. And so we had, for example, we had roads that we specifically named that were going to be completed, and then we had some other work like sidewalk and connectivity type work, for example, and a few other potential road projects that we left in the unnamed. So we're required to complete every single named road project that said we were going to do widening, or if it was an intersection that said that needed to be upgraded, we had to do that. If it's a parks and recreation proposition number 3, if we said that we were going to upgrade this facility or we were going to add these improvements to this park, we have to complete that. But we put down in there some park and recreation improvements in some of our parks and recreation facilities that if for some reason the cost of these projects came in higher, that's where we would take the money from. And so that's your named projects. You have to complete those. And if you fall short because, for example, because of the COVID, the cost for everything essentially went up anywhere from 40 to 70%. And so we did have to use some unnamed money in order to complete some of these projects. And so there's this ebb and flow of the timing of the issuance of bonds and then completing the projects. And because we were able to get a lot of the city facilities done before the COVID, we actually got great numbers. And I can tell you, Charlie Bright, who was the charge of special projects back then, did an amazing job of getting those projects out to bid, and we had all the funds we needed to complete them, such as the Veteran Center building, number 1, the Senior Citizen Annex would be the second one that was really, really important, and then we look at the arts at 302, are 3 projects that we were able to get out before the pandemic hit.
Let's debunk a myth here real quick. The money from the 2018 bond, the $210 million, that's available as soon as the voters say yes to the vote, right?
No, it's not.
So how do we do that then? This is getting into that whole 10-year series. So explain that process.
Well, when you do a 10-year package, it's $210 million is what the voters approved. Some people ask the question, well, does that mean that you're going to sell $21 million worth of bonds every single year? 21 times 10, $210 million, right?
Makes sense to think of it that way.
That's not the way it works, because we're keeping the tax rate, which right now I believe is 16.26.
16.49.
Okay, 16.49. Thanks for clarifying that. In order to keep that the same, 2 things have to happen and determine how much we can sell in a given year. We have to look at what the assessed value has gone up, which gives you additional capacity. And then we have to look at what bonds we paid off, which gives you additional capacity for the issuance of debt to repay those bonds. And so we have to do this calculation. And so we came up with a 10-year package, and it showed that for 1 year, for example, we might have been able to sell $11 million, and the next year was $21 million. So there's a difference depending on what we have available in order to keep that tax rate for the repayment of bonds the same. Now, we were fortunate so far in this package is that I had anticipated conservatively a 2.5% increase in each year in the assessed value, and because of the explosive growth that we've had in Broken Arrow, both in Tulsa and Wagner County, is that the amount that the assessed value went up was actually higher than what was projected, which allows us to actually sell more of the bonds than we had anticipated. So actually, if we thought we were going to sell $11 million this year because the assessed value went up 5% instead of 2%, that might have meant that we can now sell $14 million worth of bonds. Well, that's coming off of the back of the package in order for us to get more projects done. And so actually, we will have actually sold all 10 years because of the increase in assessed value over the years in 8 years instead of 10 years. So that'll allow us to be able to get to the projects that were at the back end in years 9 and 10 respectively, going to be able to get to them a little bit sooner because we're going to be able to have the funds. But normally it's not just a straight, if it's, for example, we could be looking at $400 million, no new tax rate change in this package. I doubt very seriously, and we actually won't know that number until probably late August of this year, what it will be for the April 7th vote of next year. I don't believe that's going to be 10 years, $40 million a year. Like I said, it's going to be different numbers based on the increase in assessed value and paying off previous bonds that the voters had approved. So hopefully that answers your question.
It absolutely does, and it answered a couple of other questions that I had a little bit later on down the line. So you had talked about 49 of those 55 projects are underway or completed. So do we have to have all of those projects? Do you have to have all the projects from one bond completed as far as construction and everything? I mean, wrapped up, done, put a bow on them. Do they have to be like that before you can actually go to a next bond? Is that even possible?
The answer is no, and it's not possible if you have projects like we have in the package, which include road projects, stormwater projects, all the infrastructure projects that we do. They take multiple years. And so if you have a project in year 9 or 10 that's a road project that fell in terms of the package in the end of the year, we know now road projects, from the time you start the design and begin with looking at acquiring the right-of-way, the relocation of utilities, and the actual, when you award a contract for construction and the completion, it can be anywhere from 3 to 4 years. And so there will be projects in year 9 and 10 that are road improvement projects. I'll give you a perfect example, that a road project that'll be towards the end of the package, that'll be 209th between 51st and 41st.
Okay.
That is a project that right now we're doing the design, and then we're working on the right-of-way, but we haven't sold, to my knowledge, the complete package of the funds needed to complete that road project. So that one will be for example, would be a project that will go past the 10 years because it takes multiple years to complete the project. And I think what's important, even though it's not possible, you still need to educate the voters that some of the projects in the back end, for example, there is a fire station that is being considered right now, and where we are, and we're basically in year 7, that those funds could be awarded this year or next year, and it takes about a year and a half to complete a fire station. So that might take a little bit longer than 10 years. So those are 2 examples of a project or 2 that could actually take longer, but I think you've got to provide the public good education. That's why we do so much with transparency with our Drive MBA program, a video segment, for example, where we're talking about projects we're working on right now. We're going to talk about projects that are going to be happening, and the segment I like, which is important going into a bond package, is look in the rearview mirror. Because we get out on a road and we say, the voters gave us the funds for this project, and here is just a quick reminder that you gave us the funds, we completed the project, and we say thank you.
Yep, absolutely, and that's a great conversation to have there, because I think it's really important for people to understand that just because the bond is completed, as in securing all the funds for the projects, there's still quite a bit of work that has to be done to actually get to what you say, the orange cones, whether it's a street or it's a sidewalk or a building or whatever, to actually get that construction completed.
We have a lot of education to do, and
right.
That's something we work very hard on, which you're the one that's directly responsible for that. And it's one of the things I love to do is the transparency in the public education. And what's really cool about Broken Arrow, there's many things that are cool about Broken Arrow, but one of it is we have a lot of folks in our community that actually pay attention to what's going on at City Hall. They engage with us in many different forums, not only just coming to the public events we have, but also on our social media platforms. Anytime they see me, they want to talk about what's going on around the city. We got folks that come to council meetings when we give these updates. And I love that about Broken Arrow is I believe we have a very informed citizenry.
I was at lunch today, and I had a lady come up to me and said, "Excuse me, just want to tell you I appreciate the videos that you put out there." And don't know who she was. A very nice lady, but it felt good. And so you know that people are watching what it is that we're doing. All right, so that's 2018.
Okay.
Doing fantastic, doing gangbusters on that bond. So now let's look ahead to 2026. You mentioned a little bit earlier 6 propositions: transportation, public safety, parks and recreation, public facilities, drainage, stormwater. So we were fortunate in 2018, the voters all approved all 6. When 2026 comes along, we're going to put together these projects with the community's input and have them be a part of the process. But what happened? Do they have to approve all 6? And if they don't approve all 6, what happens to the other propositions that do get passed? How does that all work?
Well, it is a package in terms of what is being presented, but it's an individual vote. So
For each of the propositions?
That's correct,
Okay.
Aaron. So when Joe Q. Citizen goes into the polls on April 7th of next year, depending on how many packages there are, if there's 7, if there's 8, or just 6, depending on what council decides, they're going to go in and they're going to vote individually on each package. So they're going to go in and vote. They're going to vote however they're going to vote for Prop 1, Prop 2, Prop 3, etc., all the way through 6 or 7 or 8, depending, like I said, what's there. If a proposition doesn't pass, then we don't have any authorization to actually issue bonds for the work that was in that proposition. So in other words, if Proposition 1 and 2, 3 pass and 4 didn't, but 5 and 6 and 7 did, then we'll go ahead and issue bonds related to those projects. But Proposition number 4, hypothetically, then we could not issue any of that work. And so what I would do, I would really first and foremost is we would proceed with putting together the recommendations to council on what to sell in year 1. And then I would also talk to council about sending out a survey to the citizens to find out what is it they didn't like about Proposition number 4 and drill down specifically to here were the projects in the package and ask them questions about what were they concerned about. And there may have been a project or two within the total package because, like you said, there were 88 projects, 55 named in the 2018 bond package. It'll be the same thing. The numbers haven't been decided yet. What'll be named and what is not, because the council ultimately makes that decision. So once we get that, if there was a package that didn't pass, then we would go ask the public in one of our great surveys that we do. We'd list all the projects and we'd find out what their concern about it was. We'd ask them, "Did you vote?" Possibly, and then we'd say that here are the projects. Did you like this project? Somehow we'd structure that to try to get the additional feedback we need to determine why that proposition didn't pass. And I've done this. I've had a proposition in St. Charles, Missouri one time that didn't pass. It was related to a parking garage, and it didn't pass. Just barely didn't get a voter approval. So we did the exact same thing. Took a survey. We found out exactly what the concerns were. Then we basically modified the project that we were going to be doing, reduced the cost and the scope and so forth, put it back out, and it passed overwhelmingly. So I think that's our responsibility, is that if the public rejects something, to find out why, so then we can, if it's that important, and in this case, Proposition number 4 will more than likely be city facilities, which are extremely important in terms of providing great services. You need to have great facilities, not only the city, but also the quality of life facilities that would be in there, like the senior center, veteran center, Arts 302. I'm speaking all in hypothetics here.
Right.
I would definitely want to know what the public was the reason they were concerned, and then recommend the council that we would go back to the public and try to do a bit more public education, or we may not include something that was causing folks some concern about a particular project.
And if a proposition doesn't pass, does that change anything as far as the series, the number of years of the bond? Does it change anything as far as the millage rate? We're targeting a no tax rate increase on this. If one of the propositions changes, what does that do to any of that, if anything?
Well, it lowers, first and foremost, the total amount of money that you ultimately being able to issue. Okay.
So for right now, we're looking, and like you said, we won't know till August, but right now we're looking about 400 million. So obviously, if one proposition doesn't pass, it's immediately going to drop.
Exactly.
Depending upon how much was allocated for that one prop.
So depending on when you went out and asked the survey and found out why, to answer your question, I don't know. It's one of those, honestly, where if one of the propositions did not pass, we would want to find out why, have some discussion. Then if council authorized it, I would be able to tell them that if we go ahead and go back out, would there be any impact in terms of the tax rate? Because I know the council, they made it very clear, they want to keep the tax rate the same, which obviously limits what we can actually ask the voters for. If in fact it required, issuing the whole package required there to be a change in the tax rate, then we would probably pull back some of the projects in order to keep it a no tax rate type vote for the citizens. Because if there was, I'm sure council and I would myself would have some concerns about whether we would want to, or if council and the administration felt like, hey, this is really important. We're going to leave it the way it is, and we're going to work harder on public education. I mean, that's all those hypotheticals that you would have to look at if the voters for some reason just didn't feel comfortable approving one of the propositions in the total package.
You and I talk all the time about transparency and being very open with the public, and that's one of the things I appreciate working for you and working for the city, is that you don't shy away from those things. One of the big questions, one of the big comments that comes from folks in any general obligation bond question, whether it's a school or a municipality, is such as this one, it's a no tax rate increase. And a lot of folks will say, yes, but if you vote it down, it's a tax increase or it's a tax decrease for us. Yes. However, this is how we're able to pay for capital improvements, is through these general obligation bonds. So yes, it's kind of an extension of that millage rate because it's going to keep it the same. And so doing that allows us then to grow our city through infrastructure, quality of life projects. Can you talk just a little bit about that and why it's so important that these bonds get passed?
Well, I think you covered, you basically hit a couple things that I'm going to say, but let me just reiterate this. And I am going to share with you, because you and I have talked about it, is that I'll have an opening letter come out sometime in April in the utility bills that talks about where we are in this 2-year cycle for the next general obligation bond package. And then at some point, probably in July, there'll be a second letter that will come out that will talk about what is a bond and what is a bond package and what does the bond package consist of. And here's why that's important. We've had so many new residents move into our community since we did this in 2018. I'm not sure where those residents came from, whether they came from another community in Oklahoma or they actually moved into Oklahoma, and what they're used to in terms of how the cities they came from supported their infrastructure. And so I feel like we have an obligation to write a letter that explains exactly what this process is, what it means, why we have to go ask for bonds, why we can't use sales tax or some other revenue that we have to be able to pay for these projects. So to answer your question is that it's extremely important. Broken Arrow is known. In fact, we just got an announcement today, once again, that we're recognized as one, like the 14th or 15th best city to live in the south or southwest part of our country.
Yep, and a nice consumer affairs story.
It really was to be ranked that high. My point being is that people live here, people come here because of the quality of life that exists here. A big determining factor of quality of life is your city's infrastructure. Police and fire, obviously, is always the number one issue in our city. We want to keep strong police and fire, because if you're not safe, you've heard me say it how many times now, 100, 200 times, I believe the success of a community begins and ends on its commitment to public safety. If you're not safe, it has the negative effects it can have in your city are well documented. Okay. When it comes to public infrastructure, we're talking streets and roads, we're talking parks and recreation, we're talking city facilities, we're talking stormwater management. All of these things contribute to a great quality of life. And these are very big ticket projects. For example, to widen a road right now in $25 to go from 2 lanes to 3 lanes is approximately $7 million. Okay? To go from 2 lanes to 5 lanes is approximately $10 million. to complete those projects. The city does not have enough sales tax to complete really even one of those projects without having to not do other projects or operational activities. There just isn't enough money in sales tax to be able to support a program that could pay for these large ticket items. I mean, for example, a fire truck. We just dedicated 2 fire trucks earlier this week that were approved in the 2018 bond package. They were about $1 million a piece. $1 million a piece, and there were 10 trucks in that package. And so the city just doesn't have the sales tax to be able to do that. And so when I lay out this letter, I'm going to talk about how much sales tax we collect and where that sales tax goes so the people can understand where is our sales tax going. Well, we do the Thrive edition every year, which talks about money in, money out, but this is another opportunity just to explain that. And so we wouldn't be able to complete these projects with what dollars we have. There just isn't enough money going around to be able to pay for these projects and to continue to maintain a great quality of life in our city.
Yeah, and I think that's a really incredible point, and give a shout out to the mayor because she brought that up as part of your report, your update to them
Yes, she did.
During the city council meeting. And so I thought it was a really important point that she brought up to talk about the difference between capital improvement projects and operations and how they are funded differently, and that we wouldn't be able to have the capital improvements program that we have if we solely had.
Well, let me add a caveat to your question with regard to the amount that we can borrow. We keep the tax rate exactly the same. Okay. Well, that means you have to make choices, and there are projects that basically just don't make the cut. And I go back to what I said earlier in the vibe, is that the voters approved $210 million worth of projects. I presented to the council for their consideration $311 million approximately dollars worth of projects, and we had to leave basically $111 million on the drawing board, so to speak. Well,
and that was 8 years ago.
Exactly, it was 8 years ago. Well, there were 2 projects that I really hated to leave on the drawing board, and one of them is Tucson between Aspen and Olive, because there's great development that's happening down there, and the other one was basically Omaha, which is 51st from Aspen to Elm Place. Those are 2 projects that I will recommend to council because there's a lot of growth happening in those areas. There's just the 2-lane roads. Essentially, the amount of traffic on those roads is increasing to the point, based on the data of the number of cars on there, they need to be wide. And so we're going to be in the same situation. In order to keep the tax rate the same, you have a limit on what it is that you can submit to the voters. And so basically sometimes we go, well, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? Well, it was considered, but being the city we are, that we're fast growing, we need to rebuild our infrastructure. In some places we need to expand our infrastructure. You got to find the ebb and flow and what the priorities are to continue to use the dollars you have in the most appropriate way that keeps your traffic moving, provides connectivity, creates great parks and recreation opportunities, and everything else will be in the package. Those are all things that are going to maintain a great quality of life we have in our city.
It's going to be a pretty tough juggling act to prioritize, especially whenever you're looking at, number one, the amount of dollars that you're going to be able to have based on the assessed value, and then some of those tent poles, such as public safety and streets. And how do you determine? I mean, it's got to be pretty tough, I would imagine, especially when you go back to 2018 and you're starting to schedule out and program, okay, these are the projects that we're going to do for, this first series. But then you have somebody over here saying, well, wait a second, I think we need to put this in that first series. How difficult is that?
It's really difficult, and I'll just step back a little broader here, is that Broken Arrow has a history of doing bond projects, and probably one of the best in the state besides Oklahoma City. Okay, and the public has always been supportive of the bond projects or packages that the city has put forth, and it started with actually focusing just on streets and roads. It was 90-some% when they first started, and now we're in a situation where one of the things that I'll have to do and provide a recommendation to the council is determine what percentage should each proposition be of 100%. And in order to basically make sure you're addressing the number one comment we get from the public, you've got to have a good portion of the package dedicated to asphalt and concrete, because that's what they want. And it's really in two types, I should say. One is actually road widenings to accommodate transportation, and secondly, some money in there to basically rebuild and to do maintenance on the streets that are already here. So what percentage? And I could see that percentage being somewhere in the mid-40s in order to make sure we got a good, robust package for transportation. Then once we actually determine where that line is on which projects are going to make it or not, then Kenny Schwab and myself, along with our bond counsel, and probably Charlie Bright and his team, will have to take a look at lay out the 10-year package and determine, based on, once we know this won't happen probably until, I would say, the late part of September, early part of October, because we won't get next year's assessed value to know exactly what we can do till late August. So we'll have the public forums around Labor Day. Once those are completed and we get all the feedback from the public, we'll begin to actually kind of get a better view of exactly which projects that rose to the top from the public, what the directors believe, what the council believes, and it'll all come together. And then we'll have to lay out which projects are a priority. And some of that will be roads, some of that will be parks, some of it will be public safety. And then we start laying it out based on priorities, and that's what we'll present to council. And when council look at it, they'll make the final determination. And they may feel that there's a project in year 5, hypothetically, that needs to be in year 1. And then if that's the case, we'll go back and we'll adjust the 10-year program accordingly.
So those that project list that you were just talking about giving to council, and I'm moving back now, kind of coming back into real time, if you will, with your updates that you gave to them in February and the early part of March, the first meeting in March. You talked about getting council their bond books, so and likely getting those to them at the end of, I think you said end of March, most likely, so they could have a couple of months to review. It's going to take a couple of months for them to review these bond books?
Yes, and yes.
There's that much information.
Yes, they're going to get it at the end of this month, and yes, it's going to take a little while to review it, because we did something different this time. Because, to me, I like to work right now, but I would like to be thinking about the future, because I believe that's what city managers are supposed to do is to help council establish the vision. That vision comes from the city, the businesses, the leadership team, the staff, and all these different input that we get. And so I felt like I would do something this year that was a little bit different, is that instead of just looking at one bond package, 2026, we put together a capital improvement program for bond packages for more than likely the next 3 years, next three bond cycles, exactly. So we have about, I would say, $1.2 billion worth of projects. About $400 million of that are the different road projects. We could have a bond package just on transportation alone for projects, okay? And so it is important that everyone understand is that there are only a certain number of dollars that we can do to keep the tax rate the same, and that we're actually looking at this from a larger view about what is in this package. So the council members, they're going to get the total bond book or project book for all the different propositions. And we're going to go through those. And so they're going to get that, and they're going to have about a month to take a look at it on their own. And then we'll have some preliminary discussions about questions they may have. Then we're going to take a month off. The month of May, we'll take off from the bond program and actually do the FY 2026 municipal budget. And once that gets the public hearing, the first meeting in June, then we'll go back to the bond program, and we're going to schedule at least 3 meetings in June, where I would say probably these meetings may be all day, to where council is going to go through each proposition one at a time. They're going to look at all the projects, and what I'm going to do to help them is I'm probably going to have a preliminary line that says, of this total package, these projects above this line definitely have been determined by directors, by the community groups, civic groups, user groups, and the public and the steering committee that I've created, made up of citizens and our partners from the chamber and the school district, everything above this line is what we believe the council should consider as a priority. But they'll get all the projects because we may get to the public forums and the Labor Day timeframe, like it did in 2018, and there may be some projects that score really high that are below the preliminary line that get pulled up in because the public thinks that's very important.
So that was something you learned in 2018.
Oh, yes.
Or I guess 2017, leading up to the 2018 bond, is that you went into some of these public forums and the community said, hey, this one's really important, but you had it down low, and at that point, you had to move it up high.
Everything is on the table. Everything is on the table until City Council makes a motion and passes the ordinance establishing which projects are going to be in the bond package in each specific proposition. Everything's on the table, and that's the way it should be, because you don't want to say, although I know there are some that definitely need to be in there, council has the ultimate say. And so the public gets to come in, and I've been through this fortunately a number of times, and I can't remember the time where there wasn't something that was the city council and the staff were thinking maybe it's a little bit lower, but the public at the public forums came in and said no, and there was just an overwhelming response that we'd like to see this. And because everything's on the drawing board and nothing's actually been etched in stone, I've seen projects get moved up based on public feedback, and that's the way it should be, because these are the people that are going to have to vote on it.
And that's why it's really important for folks to be engaged and to come out
Yes.
and be a part of that process, because that probably would have been left on the cutting room floor, if you will. So we've talked about here in the spring, or the coming up spring. We haven't quite hit spring yet. I'm ready for it.
Yes, I am too.
And then we've talked about summer. We've talked about fall with what we're looking at as far as basically 3 meetings there. And then so in the winter, probably December, maybe early January is when you anticipate council to put their final stamp of approval on the project list for the 26 bond?
I would say the final 2 phases are, I'd probably say December, January, because according to state law, you have to call for the election and have the ordinance passed at least 60 days in advance of when you're going to vote on it. So April 7th, and so, by April 7th, by February 7th, they've got to have everything locked down. Okay, and legislation passed, resolution, all that's going to be taken care of. So I think actually December and January are going to be very critical, and I would anticipate they're going to give themselves a little bit of room and look at actually adopting that sometime in the early part of January, but that's up to them. As we get closer in the fall, we'll start looking at that schedule. That's a phase, and then the final phase, which is really, to me, the fun phase. It's the best phase. It's the public education, because that's when you get to spend 2 months going to civic organizations, community groups, HOAs, the Chamber of Commerce, the school district, school board meetings, and actually presenting the package that everyone's going to have an opportunity to weigh in on. And I love that part of it, because folks ask lots of great questions about how did this project make the list. And to me, you get to say that we did this complete vetting, and we'll have some of our steering committees there. Council members will be out discussing, because all we can do is public education. We can't tell people to vote yes.
That's right.
We're not allowed to do that. But that 2 months is a lot of fun, because you get to meet residents. You get to talk about the vision and what's happening in the community. Most importantly, get to talk about the projects and how these projects are going to maintain the great quality of life. Because I believe in our city, that's what people are really looking for. They're looking to continue to have a great quality of life, and a part of that is investing and reinvesting in infrastructure.
Yeah, and you talked about those last 2 months before the bond vote comes into play. Tons of public education with HOAs and whatnot, but we've actually started that. I've spoken to an HOA already this year. You've spoken to some. I know quite a few other, Chief Arnold. A lot of folks have already been talking and getting the word out about this. And so it's really important, if you are watching this and you're part of an HOA, reach out to us, because we'd love to be able to come talk to you, get on that list, and be able to tell you what's going on as far as here in the city and then in the future with this bond project. Yeah, this segment's publishing in May, or excuse me, not in May, but in March. And so right now, we've got a way for folks to get engaged with this process, and that's through our Parks and Recreation micro survey that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, there it is. How excited are you? That big smile, the big Spurgeon smile.
I'll tell you, you know what I'll tell you. that package. I mean, I'm kind of stuttering in my words.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about it because there's a possibility that we may get to vote on a new community center in the southwest part of our city.
Which is huge.
How
We've
cool
heard that
is
people want that. As a Southie, I would like that.
I mean, the survey last year said that number, the number of people that responded said that scored very high. And you know what? There could be a water component to it, but that water component could be $20 million. But there's other projects that actually Matt Hendren and his team, I mean, for example, pickleball's blowing up.
It is.
I mean, do we need a couple of outdoor pickleball courts? Do we need another dog park in the northwest part of our community? Do we need to expand the sand volleyball courts during the summertime? They're jammed.
Yeah.
I mean, we got the best sand. We need lighting. I mean, there's other projects. There's community parks that we want to make sure that are going to be replacement and equipment that needs to be in there. I can't wait till we get that survey out because I think it's going to get a great response, number one.
Well, remember, it's out right now.
Oh, it is. That's right. It is.
It's out right
okay.
now. And don't forget, you got to tell people about the master plan for Elam Park and all those amenities too.
Yes, there was a lot of work that was put on by that committee and the city council members in the subcommittee to come up with that master plan. And so we're asking questions about that because we want that to be a premier place, potentially just like Central and Ninos is.
That's
right.
So
I just get excited talking about Parks and Recreation, anything we do in terms of projects, because I know how much the residents want these improvements. And if you can keep it at no change in the tax rate, and we work really hard and show them that this is what you gave us before. We've completed it, and if you trust us and give us the funds again, this is what we're going to do.
Yep.
I just feel really good about how Broken Arrows look at the importance of reinvesting in their community.
Well, that Parks and Recreation survey, it's on the city website right now. It'll be on the city website through March 31st. So this is your opportunity. Let us know what's important to you, because it's quite possible that some of the things that we're pulling from this could be on that list of projects in the Proposition 3, I think it would be the Parks and Recreation.
That's right.
Great conversation.
Sure is.
I look forward to doing this each month now as we get to April 2026. It'll be a fun time.
It will. I look forward, Aaron, and I just can't wait to get out there and start engaging with the community when council gets everything and they look at it in June, and then we get late summer and get those public forums. It's an amazing interaction we get to have with the community, and I need to close out by sending a shout out to all the department directors for their work, especially Charlie Bright and Shannon Marshall from our engineering department. Shannon Marshall is the one that's been the tip of the spear in terms of gathering all these projects. Chief Jeremy Moore is taking a little bit of different role for me and working with the Tulsa City County Library, because there could be a project there. That's where that 7th proposition could be, because there could be a partnership for South Broken Arrow. And I'm kind of throwing out that right now because we're going to be talking to them about trying to maintain a great quality of life as it relates to library. So there could be a project we consider there. He's been just fantastic. The entire engineering construction, and Travis Small's back, and everybody just needs to get a shout out. Finance department, we have a committee that meets basically about every 3 weeks that are looking at what action steps need to be done till the next meeting, and everybody's working very, very hard. And I'm so humbled at the hard work, and I appreciate the council members trusting us and allowing us to move forward, keep them up to date every single month. At some point, they'll be super engaged with. They've got the hard decision of deciding which project, and staff's going to make it as easy as we can in terms of here's what the public said, and then they'll get a chance to do a lot of public education about this time next year.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun to be able to see what possibilities are out there to improve our city, to enhance that quality of life, and it really does kind of ring true. Broken Arrow really is the city where opportunity lives.
It is. Absolutely, Aaron.
Appreciate it.
That's right.
The Vibe Broken Arrow is produced by the City of Broken Arrow. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to hear more about Broken Arrow, the city where opportunity lives.